Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this business session number 1 of the association. It is a delight for me to see all of you. I am Brian Blunt. I am the president of Union Presbyterian Seminary with campuses in Richmond, Virginia, and Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also the president of the board of directors. Let me formally welcome you all to this gathering this day. I also want to now formally call our meeting to order. This meeting, as you know, is centered around the theme of quality, clarity, flexibility, re-envisioning theological education for a new generation. The mission of the Association of Theological Schools is to promote the improvement and enhancement of theological schools to the benefit of communities of faith and the broader public. We are, of course, also meeting in very unusual times. There are circumstances that are swirling around us that have caused us to make significant adjustments in our meeting. First, of course, is the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic that causes us, therefore, to be meeting here online. We were to be meeting, as you know, in Vancouver. We are instead meeting in our homes, in our offices, or other places where we have technological capability to join in. We do value the opportunity through the gift of technology and the incredible efforts of the ATS staff that have made it possible for us to hold this as a virtual biennial meeting. So I'm grateful to them for all the hard work they have done in the background. They will be continuously working throughout the process while we are meeting together. We also know about the protests that are now occurring following the killing of George Floyd, the systemic racism that has been a part of the structural injustice that has led to situations and circumstances of which George Floyd's murder is one instance. There was a wonderful forum yesterday on Black Lives Matter and the issue of systemic racism that was held for CEOs and CAOs of our member institutions, as we talk together about how we might be resources and resource each other in the future with regard to such matters. So those two circumstances obviously will be impinging on our minds and our thoughts as we gather to do the work of the association. We also have a once-in-a-generation opportunity at this meeting to vote on a new set of standards during the commission sessions that will be later today and tomorrow morning. We have a wonderful task force that has worked with that endeavor, and my thoughts and appreciation go out to them for all the work that they, working with the commission, have done. Now, you will know that as we have our gathering today, we have just over 200 registered voting members from ATS member schools who will be with us and who are watching via live stream, and also on the ATS's YouTube channel. Let me, because we are doing this as a virtual meeting and we are depending on technology, I want to ask one of the members of the staff of the ATS to share with us, to give us a brief orientation to the working of Zoom, our platform for this meeting. So I'm going to call on Christopher Tay at this moment. And Christopher, would you orient us a little bit at this time?
Glad to do that, Brian. Thank you for everyone's time. And I am placing into the chat some more information about our features today. I'd like for everyone to make sure that their names are legible when they are joined in the system. I realize that my account right now has my email address. That's in case anyone has any issues, you can email me. All designated voters and panelists will be muted until they're recognized by the presiding officer. You'll use the raise hand feature, which is the middle button in your Zoom layout there. If you would like to be recognized by the presiding officer, and then you'll be recognized to speak, that's when you would unmute. There's also a Q&A button that's on the right side, I believe, and that's where you would ask questions concerning association business. The left button is the chat function, which you would only use to communicate an issue with the technology. So if you have some issues with hearing the webinar, with voting, or with the Q&A features, anything related to Zoom, hopefully you have access to the chat to be able to enter that. But again, my email address is also listed on the screen. There is a bit more information about polling, so let me also then enter some information about that. All of the voting will take place via the Zoom poll feature in this webinar. So at the time that a vote is called, you'll see a pop-up on your screen. You'll want to select the option. Be careful and deliberate with that, because you won't be able to change it once you click or tap submit. So you want to make your selection and then submit once you are sure. There is more information, including a handout, a Word file document that spells out these steps on Zoom and for voting instructions. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll also be available on the chat as well as my colleagues on staff. And at this time, I do see that a few people have used the raise hand function. We still have one person, Robert Johnson, who has a hand raised, and I'm not sure if that's a test or whether that's, oh, okay, so the hand has gone away. Lakeisha Walrond has now also raised hand and lowered, so everyone's getting a chance to work out that feature. So we see a few people now with hands raised and lowered. I believe everyone's just testing out that feature. The poll options will come up when a vote is called. Thank you for your time. Brian, back to you.
Thank you, Christopher. Christopher will be helping me throughout the process to recognize persons when hands are raised, so I'll be appreciative of his assistance throughout this process. I want to remind everyone also of the importance of evaluation to the quality of the association's work. Everyone who is registered will receive a link to an electronic evaluation at the conclusion of the meeting. I want to encourage you to complete that evaluation. It helps us to better prepare for future meetings. At this time, I want to introduce Gary Simpson, who is the senior pastor of the Concord Baptist Church of Christ in Brooklyn, New York, and also a public member of the ATS Board of Directors. He is going to give our opening prayer. Gary.
Let us pray. Almighty God, before whose face the generations rise and the generations fall, and in whose presence each and every generation is expected to do its work for the good of all creation. We thank you for this biannual gathering of the Association of Theological Schools in the United States and Canada. We thank you for our common challenge and our common work. We ask that each and every point of entry and access be blessed in and beyond the agenda of our shared business these days. In this moment, we acknowledge that we are yet grieving. We pray today in memory of loved ones, colleagues, friends who have succumbed in this global pandemic. And for those whose bodies and beings are particularly vulnerable to the evils of violence centered in difference, there are no others in you. Bless now our proceedings, our leadership and staff, for the good of your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Gary. At this time, I want to call on our Executive Director of ATS, Frank Yamada. I will ask him if he would share his Executive Director's address.
Thank you, Brian. Greetings, members of the Association of Theological Schools. 2 years ago, I gave my first address as Executive Director of the Association of Theological Schools and the Commission on Accreditation. ATS was celebrating its centennial, 100 years as an association dedicated to quality in theological education. I listed how much things have changed in 100 years and what life was like in 1918. The world had been decimated by a world war and was struggling to recover. It was a time of invention and discovery with the advent of airmail, the production of an affordable car, zippers, and toasters. 1918 was the year that the curse of the Bambino began, marking the last World Series for the Boston Red Sox until 86 years later. Ironically, I omitted a significant worldwide catastrophe, an omission that is all too glaring in these current days. 1918 through 1920 also marked the period of the Great Flu pandemic that infected hundreds of millions of people with deaths in the tens of millions. I would add that 3 short years after the founding of the American Association of Theological Schools in 1921 was the massacre and desecration of Black lives and communities in the Greenwood District, also known as Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Life was very different in the period surrounding 1918, there is no doubt. Life was different, but in some ways history repeats. History repeats. Through an insidious virus that takes the lives of millions of people with inadequate responses from systems that were incapable of addressing the health crisis medically, the human crisis morally, and the social crisis structurally. History repeats through the massacre of Black lives and communities, all in the name of preservation of a system of white supremacy that simultaneously sought to preserve one way of life while destroying the lives of people of color and denying them the basic values of human dignity, community, and the sufficient means to attain and to sustain that life. Life was very different, but history repeats. In theological education, this statement is also true. In 1918, the question about theological schools that would hold for decades holds true for today. Was the enterprise financially sustainable? Was the quality of the schools and their practices sufficient? Were the schools training leaders for the church in ways that would meet the needs of the church and society? All of these questions have become even more poignantly relevant given the convergence of social, structural, and moral crises that we are currently facing. What is also true about the past is that theological schools embedded in each of the mission statements of the broad family of ATS schools is the focus on formation and religious and moral leaders who can lead in these times of significant change and crisis. This is a moment. History repeats, and so it is redundant and obvious to say that we are in a moment. These are the moments around which history books are written and rewritten. This is a moment in which failures of leadership become glaring reminders of our unwillingness to face realities right in front of us, and where leaders emerge from the pulpit in the synagogue, from the halls of the academy, and from the streets and public square to point to a better way. This is a moment. In a recent commencement address for Lexington Theological Seminary, a remote commencement address, one of the signatures of this current COVID-19 pandemic world in which we are living, I, following many others, have said that this moment is characterized by the twin pandemics of the novel coronavirus, which has ransacked our healthcare system, infected millions, and has killed hundreds of thousands worldwide, and systemic racism, which has led to a centuries-long pattern of the killing of Black people and the decimation of communities of color. With COVID-19, what has become clear is that though local and state economies have sought to reopen, we are far from finished with this virus. Dr. Anthony Fauci and others have said recently that this virus is far from through with us. We are indeed not in the middle of a second wave of the virus, but we have not yet overcome the first wave, and things are escalating. Infection hotspots continue to increase with alarming frequency in regions, cities, and in rural areas. The second pandemic, systemic racism, unlike the coronavirus, is far from novel or new. It is buried into the centuries-old fabric of our countries, its structures, their structures, and our very way of life. As Willing Jennings said in a recent ATS webinar, and I paraphrase, our educational apparatus is built to increase our comfort with the realities of violence and greed. In the middle of this system that causes this violence and greed, communities of faith and the academy sleep well at night. Both of these pandemics also point to another converging crisis underlying and brought about by COVID-19 and systemic racism, and that is the economic challenges and fallout. Tens of millions of Americans and Canadians have lost their jobs or are unemployed as a result of the effects of COVID-19. The economic implications have affected higher education as well. Universities, colleges, and theological schools have already begun to rethink financial plans and annual budgets to account for these economic headwinds. Friends, we are in a moment that is swirling in the wake of at least 3 converging crises. And yet, I want to channel Dean Emily Towns, who in her comments on the webinar last week said, "Do I sound angry? Yes. Do I despair? No. That was not how I was raised, and I was raised to always live my life in hope." One of the ways that Dr. Towns pointed to this hope was to, and I quote, "stop talking and start listening to the gift of the diversities among us," unquote. For her, diversity is not an issue or a problem, but it is a gift of living into the richness of God's creation. She says, and I'm going to quote, "This is a theology that listens to the gifts of creation, the creation God has given us, and then puts legs and feet to the actions that we need to take," unquote. And then Dr. Towns' focus for this particular webinar, the actions to take would be those actions that lead to the stopping and the senseless killing of Black people. So, as I move in my address to this theme of this meeting, quality, clarity, flexibility, re-envisioning theological education for a new generation, that is the theme of the biennial meeting. It was a theme that was cast around this threefold set of words that were recurring consistently throughout the process to redevelop the standards, this 2-year process. They are also our outcomes reflected in the standards. Now, I'll admit that I feel a little like a preacher who was invited to preach a sermon on Sunday months in advance, and then when the moment for the sermon came, realized that this would not likely be the sermon title of choice to be able to address the current moment that the congregation was facing. But I would emphasize, underline, highlight that these are very good standards. These are excellent standards. And the process that brought us to this point was an exemplary process of engagement of the diverse membership of the Association of Theological Schools and the Commission on Accrediting. This was an intense 2-year discernment process with deep listening to the vast majority of the diverse member schools. This listening happened on the front end of the process before any ink was taken to paper and before any writing of any standard. This listening continued as after revised draft was crafted to address the hundreds, and in some cases, overall process, thousands of comments that we have received. The threefold themes of quality, clarity, or flexibility are not just refrains from the process, they are values and outcomes within the standards themselves. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit, clarity. In a prior version, this was also named simplicity. They are clear, from over 100 pages down to 22, including the preamble. These standards are not, however, simplistic. They are principled. They are not based in a variety of practices within ATS schools, but point to the educational principles of quality that undergird the practices within schools. Flexibility. These standards are attentive to schools' needs for the flexibility that is required in the middle of substantial changes in higher education and in the structures of the religious life within our 2 countries. And all of this clarity and flexibility is provided while not sacrificing and in fact enhancing quality. This quality is focused on principles of educational quality that can be seen throughout the membership, while being attentive to the contextual ways that quality is carried out through the particular missions of ATS schools. As we think about what these standards mean for this moment, let me be very clear. These standards are not a solution to the prior named convergence of crises that we are presently facing. I don't believe that any standards can address the confluence of the multiple things that are coming upon us at this day. I do believe they are a door, the standards are a door, an opening through which schools can emerge with a sense of revitalization of their educational missions to pivot faithfully into the current realities that they are facing. To enable schools to educate and form leaders with an agreed upon set of standards of quality, forming leaders who can draw on the resources of their particular religious and faith traditions to be co-creators in a world that is becoming. A world in which an ethics of love can be at the root of decision-making on health and policing policies. A world in which deep wells of religious traditions of justice can inform economic and social structures that encourage the thriving of all human beings, the human family who is created in the image of God. A world that is responsive to and seeks justice for those that have not in society, the widow, the orphan, the ger in biblical language, rather than the privileging of a precious few. The standards do not provide the vision for this world. That is not what they are intended to do. The vision for this world emerges from the education and formation that ATS schools provide to equip leaders to not just cast these visions, but to put hands, legs, and feet to them. There is so much more that I could say, so much more that I want to say. How the association is already marshaling its resources, research, data, and the power to convene the membership around these critical moments. How ATS schools and the staff are all currently in the process of pivoting into this new reality that has been forced upon us with strength and responding with strength, creativity, agility, and quality to provide schools with the resources that they need and the wisdom of colleagues who share in this work. How the ATS board strategic priorities all seek to resource schools for change. How we imagine hope for a shared future in this shared enterprise of theological education. Colleagues, members of the Association of Theological Schools, we are in a moment. And I don't think, though I would wish, that it will pass soon. But we have manna for the journey through this wilderness. And we have companions on this journey who will walk with us. We may get there in different ways, and we will do this work differently. But as I said in my memo to you all just a week ago, we will do this work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. We'll proceed now to our initial business for our session. Reminding you, this is business session number 1 of the Association of Theological Schools. I want to remind us first about our voting procedure. It'll be very important for us. There is some information I'd like to share about how we will be going about that process. According to the association's bylaws, each member school is entitled to 1 vote on each issue before the association. The vote will be cast by the person authorized as the designated voter from the member school who was identified through the registration process. Only these designated voters were registered for this Zoom webinar session. Designated voters will be counted for the purposes of establishing a quorum, and only designated voters can make motions and speak to the motions. Voting will be conducted through that polling feature within Zoom webinars. When a vote comes before the membership, a poll will appear, as Christopher noted earlier. It will appear to the designated voter, who will then cast the member's vote on that particular item of business. Now, we are doing this technologically for the first time, obviously. It will take us a few minutes to work through to make sure this voting process is going properly. It will take us a little bit of time, so I'm going to start with a default of 2 minutes. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for each vote to make sure that everyone has opportunity to vote. I will say that the voting is open and started, and then we'll give you opportunity. I'll give you a warning before I close the voting, and then once the voting is closed, we will make a determination. Now, how that determination is made, we will work through a judge of election. And in this case, I want to note that I have appointed Jeffrey Kent from Mayor Dissel as judge of election. Mr. Kent is a partner at Mayer Dissel, a respected leader in nonprofit accounting and auditing. As identified in the association bylaws, the judge of election, quote, shall determine the number of members of record and voting power of each, the members present at the meeting, the existence of a quorum, the authenticity, validity, and effect of proxies, if any, receive votes or ballots, hear and determine all challenges and questions in any way arising in connection with the right to vote, count and tabulate all votes, determine the result, and do such acts as may be proper to conduct the election or vote with fairness to all members, unquote. Now, the judge of elections knows the required numbers and percentages of votes needed for a motion to pass. He will tell me as the presiding officer if the motion passes or fails, and then I will communicate that to all of you. So we'll have a typical situation where I will ask if we have the results of the vote, and the judge of elections, Mr. Kent, will say yes, that motion either passes or does not, and then I will declare to the membership that the motion passes or not. So at this point, let me call upon the judge of election to see if we have a quorum. Jeffrey?
Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, we have a quorum for the 2020 biennial meeting of the Association of Theological Schools. So we may now then move on toward our agenda. Let me remind everyone that the agenda was distributed in advance. It is on pages 5 through 6 of the program book. Let me ask at this point if there are any additions to the association's business. Raise your hand. Christopher will help me identify raised hands.
I don't see any, Brian.
Thank you, Christopher. Since we don't have any, I declare that the agenda is adopted by consensus. We also, at this point, need to adopt the rules for the conduct of business. I want to note that they have been adopted. I want to direct your attention to the rules for the conduct of business on pages 15 through 18 of the program book. The rules had already been previously approved by the ATS Board of Directors and the Board of Commissioners, and they have been adapted for the purposes of accommodating an online format. So again, as presiding officer today, I'm declaring that the rules of conduct, which have been adapted for purposes of this online meeting, are adopted. The next piece of business is to announce a very important person in this process, the parliamentarian. I'm appointing Cordelia Glenn Grabiak as parliamentarian. Ms. Glenn Grabiak is a partner at K&L Gates with a specialization in nonprofit organization law. She may be called upon by myself to address issues and areas of parliamentary process and with the rules for the conduct of business. I see that she's on. Would you like to say hello?
Thank you, Brian. It's good to be here.
Let me also note that I have appointed a committee on reference and counsel to assist, if necessary, with the disposition of business items, particularly motions that require amendments to any of the documents that will come up for business with the association. Let me first share who the members of the Committee on Reference and Counsel are. They're Todd Laginus, who is the chair, Sacred Heart Major Seminary, Christine Mitchell, St. Andrew's College, Brett Hawley, Payne Theological Seminary, Jay Truen, Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, and Margaret Mwenda, Calvin Theological Seminary. Now, as stated in the rules of conduct, and I'll be quoting here again, the Committee on Reference and Counsel's function is to expedite the business of the membership. The committee can be called upon by the presiding senior officer to work with motions or amendments that come from the floor. The committee can work with the author to perfect the language of the motion or amendment before it is presented to the membership for vote. Now, the committee may also combine similar motions into one substitute motion, work in consultation with the author to edit, combine, or substitute motions, encourage the author to take action that would not bring the motion to the assembly, and or work with the presiding officer to order the motions to be presented to the assembly. In the interest of timely processing of our business and in order to assess the full implications of any motions from the floor, new proposals or significant amendments to published reports or documents on which the membership will vote will be referred to the committee. According to the rules for conduct, motions from the floor for amendments to already published documents must be presented orally before the body and then sent in writing to ats-vote@ats.edu. Let me say that again. Motions from the floor for amendments to already published documents must be presented orally before the body and then sent in writing to ats-vote@ats.edu. That's the email address we'll use for the association's business. You'll have a different email address for the commission meetings. Those amended materials will be, or those motions will be considered by the Committee on Reference and Counsel. In the email that has the written motion, I would ask that you also provide a telephone contact number so that the committee might be able to contact you about the motion if the committee needs to do so. So each item to be referred to the committee will require a motion and a second to refer it to the committee. And that requires a simple majority of the membership in attendance. If the motion passes, the motion or amendment will be placed into the work of the Committee on Reference and Counsel. If the motion fails, the motion or amendment will not be considered by the committee. So that will be our process. This will help us expedite our business. Again, if there is a motion to amend the material that has already been presented, you will move and then move to refer to the committee. And then if there is a second, and if it proceeds, if it passes, it will be referred to the committee. They will consider it, and we will consider it as a part of our process in business session number 2 tomorrow afternoon. Okay, I think that covers the introductory part of our business. At this point, I'd like to share my own president's report to the ATS. I'd like to share a summary of key items of business conducted by the board of the association during the 2018-2020 biennial period. You may find a more extensive discussion of this material on pages 102 through 106 in your board book. I'd like to amplify some of that. The board met 4 times, had 1 meeting called for the specific purpose of providing feedback on the draft standards of accreditation. I note at this point the board's appreciation for the work of the task force working on the new standards. As has been noted, and rightly so, their work is generational in its scope and consequence. The board salutes their impressive effort and congratulates them on the work they have undertaken and are presenting to us during these 2 days of meetings. The work promises to strengthen the work of theological education in North America. The ATS board was also hard at work during this biennial period with a significant work, a new set of strategic priorities that will help orient the work of the association in the future. Frank mentioned those in his remarks. In the introduction to the new initiatives, the board recognized it is also clear that in order to improve continuously in the 21st century, schools need to adapt to shifting contexts and realities within which to accomplish their missions. For many schools, enrollment challenges and financial stresses persist. Schools are seeking to adapt their educational models in order to reach a new generation of students, even as they explore more sustainable economic and organizational models to execute their missions more sustainably. For this reason, the ATS Board of Directors has identified 4 strategic priorities that will enhance the adaptive work and innovation in which schools are engaging. And these priorities are, and I just read them for emphasis: equip leaders for effective change, explore and encourage innovative financial and organizational models, enhance adaptive work in schools' educational missions, engage the membership in its broad diversity. These 4 E's fortify the association's mission to promote the improvement and enhancement of theological schools in this age of accelerated change. It is how God is doing a new thing in theological education. When God does a new thing, it always draws from its roots to God's past mighty works among God's people. God's new thing, however, transforms the legacy and wisdom of the past into something that powerfully resonates with the needs of the present, while creating a future of hope for the people of God. The 4th priority, and it's helpful to note that these priorities are not listed in numerical prioritization. The 4th priority warrants extended comment from me, given the context of racial injustice and systemic racism that rightly preoccupy our world at present. While the program booklet shares the briefest identifications of the 4 priorities, the strategic priorities document itself elucidates an extensive discussion. The priority endeavors, among other intentions, to embrace and find strength in the association's diversity as a community of learning. One of the key tactics listed for implementation of this priority states the following: create and sustain forums that encourage respectful and generative conversations about diversity. Certainly yesterday's forum, Black Lives Matter, a biennial open forum for CEOs and CAOs, was a direct and deliberate outgrowth of that tactical intent. The forum provided the opportunity for discussion of work being done in our schools to address the matter of systemic racism, particularly important in the light of the horrific brutalization of African Americans like George Floyd. As president of the association, I affirm and celebrate opportunities such as the one yesterday, created by staff and colleagues, providing us an opportunity for reflection on one of the prevailing matters of social justice rightly occupying the full attention of our continent and world at present. Like many of you, I have been immersed in conversations far and wide in the 2 cities where my seminary has campuses, and across the broader landscape of the church and world that my seminary and all our seminaries and theological schools serve. I have written reflection papers for my seminary and for the broader church condemning the brutalization of African Americans at the hands of structural and personal violence perpetuated by systemic racism, a horror made tragically and demonically vivid in the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that a Minneapolis police officer, with his colleagues standing by, supporting and protecting him, crushed the life out of George Floyd with his knee upon his neck. As we all know by now, George Floyd is by no means an isolated incident, but the latest manifestation of atrocity committed against unarmed African Americans like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, many other men and women whose lives and liberties were crushed out. Affirmation of collegiality within diversity through forum like the one yesterday is indicated through the respect we are called upon to demonstrate to one another, our desire to support and learn from other members, our commitment to the well-being of our colleague institutions and the people employed by them, all in service to the overall mission of the ATS. In our diversity and our commitment to one another through our diversity, we are made stronger. We recognize and value the strengths that different communions and different identities bring to the common work of theological education, and I hope commit ourselves to supporting equitable access to educational opportunity and the liberating and just space necessary to take advantage of that opportunity for all within our association. Now, let me also highlight during this period 2 grant initiatives, the economic challenges facing future ministers and the educational models and practices. We're bringing grant activities to a conclusion. The ECFFM project showed significant progress in schools' ability to address student debt. It is estimated that schools' projects contributed to an estimated $50 million that was not borrowed over the last 3 years, something to celebrate. The association continues to be grateful for the generous support of the Lilly Endowment and the Kern Family Foundation in their partnership and support of theological education. And one of the most, as you know, significant developments during this biennial has been the continued development of the New Century Fund. I invite you to read more about it on page 103 of your program booklet. Particularly note the authorization of several new initiatives of the New Century Fund, especially the redevelopment of the standards, Funding from the fund supported the meetings of the task force and the engagement of the membership for input during the process. The Global Awareness and Engagement Initiative to assist in the broader global mission of theological education with international partners, and the institutional database infrastructure renewal, which will prepare the database for the next 10 years of data collection and reporting. And the Canvas hybrid learning for accreditation and programs and services, and the supporting of ATS schools in their responses to COVID-19 through a provision of resources, research, and educational offerings. All of those supported and programs that have been and continue to be important in the work of the ATS. I would also encourage you to read through the summary of the program, services, research, and member engagement report, which highlights impactful programming of the association during this biennial. In short, there is much to celebrate about the ongoing activity of the association, and I want to express my appreciation to other members of the board, and just as importantly to the staff of ATS, whose performance enables the work of the association to continue to prosper. Thank you. Now, moving on, we move to the nominating committee report for the association. The chair of the association's nominating committee is Peter Vakari. He will present the report of the committee, and a vote on the nominations will happen tomorrow. Peter, let me call on you at this point.
Thank you, Brian. Colleagues, friends, permit me to direct your attention to the
Peter, I lost your voice there for a second. This is one of those things, everyone, that will happen from time to time as we deal with bandwidth and other issues. I'm going to go ahead. I'm looking at our executive director, Frank. I'm going to go ahead and move through that process, if you don't mind, while we wait for Peter to come back on.
Brian, I could proceed as well, since I, as executive director, did staff that committee.
Thank you.
That Peter is going to be trying to probably log back on, and he can pick up where I leave off.
Thank you.
But I'm happy to give the report on behalf of Peter, since I staffed that. So if I could direct again folks' attention to the nominating committee report, which occurs on pages 140 to 143 of the program booklet. I remind you all that according to the association bylaws, another thing that I would like to do with this is to, on that report, you have directions about the process that is used for nominations. That process begins with a call to the entire membership for nominations. Then a committee is appointed by the board and by Brian, who then works through the nominations and nominations that come from the membership to be able to put forward a slate of nominees for the association's work. So what I would like to do at this time then is to actually read from that slate. So this would be the slate of officers and board members and the audit committee who are presented to the membership from the nominating committee report for this particular vote on nominations. So I am going to pull up the nominating committee slate. So this is the slate as presented by the nominating committee. For the office of president, Mark Young of Denver Seminary. The vice president, Mary McCormick, St. Mary Seminary and Graduate School of Theology. Secretary, Margaret Mwenda of Calvin Theological Seminary. Treasurer, Heather Zadanzowitz, Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. An ex officio serving as the coordinating committee chair would be the previous or past president after this biennial meeting, Brian Blunt from Union Presbyterian Seminary. For the ATS Board of Directors, nominated for a first term, Ephraim Augusto, New York Theological Seminary. Kent Anderson, Northwest Baptist Seminary. Charisse Gillette, Lexington Theological Seminary. Maria Lu Wang, City Seminary of New York, as a public member. Also for the ATS Board of Directors, nominated for a second term, for a second four-year term, Virgil Lattimore, Hood Theological Seminary. Gary Simpson, Senior Pastor, Concordia Baptist Church of Brooklyn, New York, as a public member. Sharon Tan, Eden Theological Seminary. And the nominations for Audit Committee, Regina Dancy, Hood Theological Seminary. Tom Hines, Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. James Moore, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, ex officio serving as nominee for the Commission on Accrediting's Vice Chair and Treasurer. Caleb Peacock, Pentecostal Theological Seminary, and Heather Zadanzowitz, Austin Presbyterian Seminary, again, ex officio as ATS's treasurer. Mr. Chair, Mr. President, that is the nomination slate that comes from the Association Nominating Committee.
Thank you, Frank. According to the association bylaws, we at this point this is the slate that is before us. I want to remind us, according to our bylaws, if there are nominations from the floor, we will give that opportunity. But nominations from the floor come with two requirements. First, that persons have agreed in writing to serve if they are elected. And second, that there is an endorsement of 5 voting members, which is equal to the number of institutions represented on the nominating committee. So I will at this point ask if there are any nominations from the floor, but again, remember, the person must have agreed to serve if elected, and there must be an endorsement of 5 voting members with that nomination. So the floor is open. Are there any nominations from the floor? Christopher is looking for hands. I haven't heard from him.
I don't see any at this time, Brian.
Thank you. So I will then declare the nominations for the association to be closed and remind us that the membership will vote on nominations tomorrow, and the association business session number 2, again, is found in your agenda. I want to send great appreciation to the members of the association nominating committee. Again, Peter Vicari, who is chair, formerly of St. Joseph's Seminary, Daisy Mikado of Union Theological Seminary, Alton Pollard of Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, Anna Robbins of Acadia Divinity College, and Timothy Tennant of Asbury Theological Seminary. Thanks to all of you for the work that you have done on behalf of the association in building this excellent slate of nominees. Moving right along, we are going to the applicants for associate membership to the association. Let me call your attention at this point to pages 108 to 118 in your program book. These pages contain the information about the schools that are being recommended by the ATS Board of Directors for association membership. The board has determined that each associate applicant has met the requirements for associate membership, which are listed in the program book on pages 108 through 109. The Board of Directors now recommends these 3 associate member applicants for membership into the association. Now, let me first explain that new members are elected by a supermajority, 2/3 of the members present at this session. Each applicant will be presented for a separate vote. And again, we will need a super majority, and we have a judge of elections to let us know whether that majority has been reached. We will have a board member introduce or present each of the candidate schools. And at this point, I will ask Heather Zdansiewicz, who is treasurer of the board of directors, to present Evangelia University Graduate School of Theology. Heather.
Thank you. Evangelia University Graduate School of Theology in Anaheim, California, was founded in 1995 as the Korean Theological Seminary in California, and in 1998-99 took over the operations of Pacific Baptist University, effectively becoming one institution and changing its name to Evangelia University. The school's mission is to bring glory to God, support the church in its mandate to equip the saints for ministry, and prepare reformed leaders for life. Evangelia is located in a business park in North Orange County, occupying part of its university-owned two-story building and leasing out the balance of the building. The school enrolls 70 students and offers 3 degrees: the 99-credit Master of Divinity, the 60-credit Master of Arts and Religion, and the 42-credit Doctor of Ministry, and recently was approved to offer the MA in Christian Education and the Doctor of Education in Christian Education. The students are served by 7 full-time faculty and 3 additional part-time faculty. At the time of the application, Evangelia had awarded 144 graduate degrees. On behalf of the ATS Board of Directors, I move that Evangelia University Graduate School of Theology be admitted to the association as an associate member.
Thank you, Heather. It does not require a second. I will ask if there is conversation or discussion at this time. Christopher, I take it you don't see any hands raised?
I do not see any right now, Brian.
Okay, we will then move to the vote. Let me call for the vote. Now, the poll will then appear in front of you on your screen at this point. And now let me ask you to begin to vote now, and I will give us 2 minutes. You have 30 seconds to complete your vote. Thank you. Voting is now closed. I will ask the Judge of Elections for a report.
The motion has passed.
Thank you. The motion has passed. Congratulations to Evangelia Evangelia University Graduate School of Theology on becoming an associate member of the Association of Theological Schools. On behalf of the Association of Theological Schools and the ATS Board of Directors, I welcome you to membership within the association. I'm sorry we don't have that opportunity where we can applaud, but I'm sure we're doing that wherever we are in our particular offices before our screens. Thank you, Frank. Let me at this point call on Deborah Mullen, who is a member of the Board of Directors, to present Saint Sophia Ukrainian Orthodox Theological Seminary.
Thank you, Brian. Saint Sophia Ukrainian Orthodox Theological Seminary was founded in 1972 with the primary purpose of forming and training Orthodox pastors, teachers, and leaders. From its location on 64 acres in the historic borough of Southbound Brook, New Jersey, Saint Sophia serves as the center of the spiritual and intellectual life of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in the United States and abroad as a model of Orthodox Christian faith. The seminary enrolls 32 students, a number calibrated carefully to align with the clergy needs of its churches, and has 8 full-time faculty. The seminary offers the Master of Divinity degree, completed in either a 72 or 90 credit version, depending on vocational intent and the facility in the Ukrainian language, and the 36 credit Master of Arts in Applied Orthodox Theology, which prepares students in diaconal formation. Saint Sophia Ukrainian Orthodox Theological Seminary is the sole source of ordained clergy for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in the United States, and also provides clergy to churches in many parts of the world. On behalf of the ATS Board of Directors, I move that Saint Sophia Ukrainian Orthodox Theological Seminary be admitted to the association as an associate member.
Thank you, Deborah. Again, it does not need a second, but let me open the floor now for a discussion if there is any. Are there questions or is there discussion?
There are no hands raised, Brian, so I think there are no questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Christopher. Then we will move directly to the vote. The poll should be appearing in front of you. Please cast your votes now. Again, I will give us 2 minutes. Please be advised you have 30 seconds to complete your vote. Voting is now closed. I'll turn to our Judge of Elections.
The motion has passed.
Thank you, Jeffrey. The motion has passed. Congratulations to St. Sophia Ukrainian Orthodox Theological Seminary on becoming an associate member of the Association of Theological Schools. And on behalf of the Association of Theological Schools and the ATS Board of Directors, I welcome you to membership within the association. Again, our virtual applause goes out to all of you at St. Sophia. I now call on Ekron Chin, a member of the Board of Directors, to present Southern California Seminary.
Thank you, Brian. Southern California Seminary began in 1946 as Linda Vista Bible College and Seminary. In 1997, after merging with two other Bible colleges, the school changed its name to Southern California Seminary. The Graduate School of Bible and Theology is one of three schools within Southern California Seminary and is the accreditable entity applying for associate membership. Located in El Cajon, California on 53 acres, Southern California Seminary is associated with Shadow Mountain Community Church. The school's mission is to bring glory to God by assisting local churches to equip believers of various cultures and languages to live and minister biblically based on the inerrant Word of God. The Graduate School of Bible and Theology offers 9 degrees, of which the 96-credit Master of Divinity was the first to be offered. Of the school's 8 other degrees, 4 are professional in nature and include the Doctor of Ministry, while the remaining 4 are academic and include the THM. All basic theological programs may be taken residentially or fully online, and approximately 70% of the student body takes at least some classes online. The student body of 94 is served by 5 full-time faculty who teach full-time and 2 more who teach at least half-time. On behalf of the ATS Board of Directors, I move that Southern California Seminary be admitted to the association as an associate member.
Thank you, Ekron. It again does not need a second. We therefore move to opportunity for questions or discussion. Do we have questions?
Looking for any raised hands, and I do not see any at this time, Brian. Also nothing in the chat or Q&A or email.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Christopher. Given that we do not have questions or concerns, we will.
There's a chat that just came in.
Okay, good. I see the chat. Could you speak to the governance structure of SCS in relationship with Shadow Mountain Community Church? We do have a resource person, I believe, who can speak to that.
Yes, this is Barbara Much on staff. I am pleased to speak to that. As you'll see in the program description, the Board of Trustees is comprised of 17 members, the majority of whom, but not all, are appointed by the sponsoring church, Shadow Mountain Community Church. And terms of service are 3 years. Trustees meet 3 times annually, and the president serves as the vice chair. In meeting with the trustees upon the staff visit for associate membership, staff was impressed by the engagement, the knowledge, the commitment of the Board of Trustees to the well-being and the thriving of good theological education at Southern California Seminary, and was also impressed with a breadth of conversation and diversity among members who were appointed by the sponsoring church and those who had appointment from other sources.
Thank you, Barbara. Are there any further questions? No other hands raised, Christopher. I don't see anything in the chat. So
I do not.
thank you. So we will proceed then to the vote. The poll should come up in front of you. I see it there. Please cast your vote now. Please be advised you have 30 seconds. Our voting has closed. I'll ask our Jeffrey Kent, our judge of elections, the result.
The motion has passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. The motion has passed. I also understand that we probably, our technology is allowing us to do this probably within 1 minute rather than 2. Jeffrey, does that seem appropriate to you in terms of how quickly the votes are coming in?
The votes are coming in quickly. I think sticking with 2 is fine, but if you'd like to move it down, that would be fine as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next will be the presentation of the applicants for affiliate status. Let me ask you at this point to turn to pages 119 to 120 in the program book. Let me remind you also that affiliate status is not a membership category. The bylaws define 2 types of affiliate status organizations. The first, non-degree granting organizations with a relationship to theological education in the Christian or Jewish traditions. 2, institutions of higher education offering graduate theological degrees related to communities of faith other than the Christian or Jewish faiths. Both of the applicants are of the first variety. Let me also remind us that affiliates are elected by 2/3 vote of members present at the session. And again, each applicant will be presented for a separate vote. I'm going to call on Sharon Tan, who is Secretary of the Board of Directors, to present the 2 applicants. She'll present one at a time, and then we will vote on each individually as we just did earlier. So Sharon, please.
Thank you, Brian. The Foundation for Theological Education in Southeast Asia, or FTEC, has been in the Ministry of Supporting Theological Education in China and Southeast Asia for more than 80 years. The primary purpose of FTE-SEA is to support Christian theological education in Asia through grants to institutions and projects, scholarships, and consultations, and publications in partnership with Nanjing Union Theological Seminary and 21 other seminaries of the Three Self-Patriotic Movement and China Christian Council. Association for Theological Education in Southeast Asia, Ecumenical Theological Education's Asia programs, and the BOSSI Ecumenical Institute of the World Council of Churches. As theological schools expand their global reach into China and Asia, FTE-SEA is in a position to make contacts and share information on the challenges and prospects for supporting graduate level theological education in China and throughout Southeast Asia. On behalf of the ATS Board of Directors, I move that the Foundation for Theological Education in Southeast Asia be granted affiliate status in the association.
Thank you, Sharon. It does not require a second again, so we move directly to questions or discussion. The floor is open. Apparently there are no hands raised, so we will move to the vote. You should see the poll in front of you. I'm going to try 1 minute. Let's see if we are able to do that. Our judge of elections will let us know if that's not working well, so please start your voting now. Be advised you have 30 seconds to complete your vote. Okay, our voting has concluded. Let me ask the judge of elections if he can tell us whether the result of the vote.
Yes, the motion has passed.
Jeffrey, there was a question about allowing members to know the actual numbers of the vote. I'm happy for us to do that in a visual circumstance if we're in an in-person situation that typically is reported. Are you able to do that? Will that take a great deal of time if you were to share us what the actual numbers of the vote would be?
Sure. Do you want me to go by vote or just all have been over 85%?
Okay. Yeah, I think that knowing what the percentage is would be helpful for us to know what the feel of the vote. So in this case, the percentage of affirmation was, did you say 85%?
This last vote was around 90%, but all previous have been over 85%.
Okay, thank you. Let me then say congratulations to the Foundation for Theological Education in Southeast Asia on becoming an affiliate of the Association of Theological Schools. On behalf of the Association of Theological Schools and the ATS Board of Directors, I welcome you to this status in the association. Sharon.
The Association of Asian North American Theological Educators, or ANATE, is an organization that seeks to develop and promote Asian North American Scholarship and Leadership in Theological Education, in collaboration with counterpart organizations and institutions. As a coalition of individuals and networks, its shared vision includes discerning, developing, and implementing effective bilateral and multilateral partnerships for theological education at the local, national, regional, and global levels. Contributing to a conversation on theological education across Asian, North American, and Asian diasporic, ecclesial, and institutional diversities, and cultivating scholarly and programmatic trade routes that allow for mutually agreed upon reciprocal flows of resources, expertise, and information in the service of learning, teaching, and research. On behalf of the ATS Board of Directors, I move that the Association of Asian North American Theological Educators be granted affiliate status in the association.
Thank you, Sharon. It does not require a second. Let us move then to open the floor for discussion or questions. Apparently, we do not have any hands raised. We will then move toward the vote. I'll ask if the polling could come up. And please cast your vote. You have 1 minute. Be advised you have 30 seconds to complete your vote. The voting is closed. Jeffrey, can I ask you as judge of elections to share the result?
Yes, the motion has passed at approximately 92% yes.
Thank you. Congratulations to the Association of Asian North American Theological Educators on becoming an affiliate of the Association of Theological Schools. On behalf of the Association of Theological Schools and the ATS Board of Directors, I welcome you to this status in the association. Congratulations. We now move to the presentation of the motion for changes to the ATS procedures related to membership, association bylaws, and commission bylaws. The motion on revisions to the documents related to the association recommended by the ATS Board of Directors is found on pages 121 through 125 of your program book, if you'd like to scroll there now. These revised documents were approved at the spring meeting of the ATS Board of Directors. These revisions to the ATS procedures related to membership, association bylaws, and commission bylaws were made in order to align the new standards of accreditation and new policies and procedures being voted on in the commission sessions of this biennial meeting. A summary of the changes and the rationale for them are in the program book on pages 121 through 125. The commission bylaws require both the association membership and the commission membership to approve any changes to the commission bylaws And that is why the ATS Board of Directors is recommending those revisions to the association membership. If we have any questions about that, let me pause and ask. I could ask Tom Tanner, who's Director of Accreditation, to make any further explanations.
Brian, you've explained it very well. I'm here to answer any questions that might arise.
Thank you. I'm not hearing from Christopher that any hands are raised, Tom.
None seen.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll thank you, Tom. We'll move forward to conclude. This item of business will be taken up tomorrow, June 25th, in the Association Business Section number 2, which will start at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time as found on the agenda. So at this point, we will recess until tomorrow. Frank, is there anything else I need to be aware of before we begin that process?
No, Brian, we were able to go through our business pretty efficiently. So thank you for your leadership.
Okay. All right. I would like at this point to ask for a motion to recess until tomorrow, June 25th at 2:00 p.m. And I would love to recognize someone from the assembly who would raise their hand and make a motion, and then someone who would give a second.
Douglas Rutt has given the motion, and Mark Harris has given the second.
It's been properly moved. Thank you, Christopher. It's been properly moved and seconded that we recess until tomorrow, June 25th at 2:00 p.m. Let me call for the vote. Just raise your, oh, okay, I see the vote came up there on the poll. So just hit your poll and vote, please. Vote now. You have 30 seconds to complete your vote. And our voting is closed. Jeffrey, could you tell us the result?
Yes, the motion has passed.
Thank you very much. So the motion passes. We are now recessed until tomorrow, June 25th at 2:00 p.m. Let me remind everyone that members who belong to the Commission on Accrediting, that the Commission opening plenary and business session 1 will begin at 2:00 today. And Commission members, remember to click on the specific link that you were sent for that meeting. So thank you very much for this meeting, and I will see you tomorrow at 2:00.